Welcome to Unschool, where we undoctrinate you from public school nonsense. All right, here we have Charlamagne the. Yeah, I'm not calling him that, but at least he's here criticizing DEI, right? Because DEI is a total and utter failure. And he went on Comedy Central to criticize it on a left wing TV show. So I think that's great because DEI is a total failure. There's nothing good about it. It just says you should identify people by their political identity and not who they are intrinsically as people. And I'm a believer that people have intrinsic value, right, regardless of whether they agree with me politically or not. So I think that's a significant difference between me and the supporters of DEI. Equity specifically is just socialism rebranded for the 21st century. But let's hear what Charlamagne the guy has to say.
But here's the part where you all stop applauding everything I say. The truth about DEI is that although it's well intentioned, it's mostly garbage. Okay? It's kind of like the Black Little Mermaid. Just because racists hate it doesn't mean it's good. And you know I'm right because every one of you has sat through one of those diversity training sessions and thought, this is some bullshit. And it's not just you. Over 900 studies have shown that DEI programs don't make the workplace better for minorities. In fact, it can actually make things worse because of the backlash effect.
So the issue with that, I think, is that people are living together in this country nowadays just fine and working together just fine. And then DEI brings in racial animosity, presents only two narratives, the oppressor versus oppressed narrative. And you have to be part of one group or the other, right? Which doesn't make sense historically speaking, right? Because everyone has been oppressed, right? The norm for human beings throughout history is to be born into the dirt, really. 200,000 years of human history, and most of our ancestors certainly were not rich. Most of us, you know, grew up poor. Throughout most of human history, 2/3 of children died before the age of 6. Pretty sad statistic there with hunter-gatherer societies, all the way up until 1800. Even in farming societies, the death rates were quite high. Um, so the statistics just don't, pushing DEI just doesn't make any sense.
Remember Dare from school? Y'all remember Dare? Yeah. She said, woo. DEI training is like Dare for racism. And you all know how effective that was.
That's a great comment. It's like Dare for racism, which, for Dare, it's unfortunate that it was not very effective, but it wasn't. It didn't work very well, and it didn't lower the rate of young people uh, and using illicit substances. It doesn't help any that we have plenty of advertising on television pushing the same narratives to do that sort of thing, but it wasn't as effective as we would have liked. All right, so as this article from Forbes says, he condemned DEI. That Dare comment, man, that was a good one. Charlamagne the God appeared as a guest on The Daily Show, which I can't decide if The Daily Show is good or not. I saw a little bit from The Daily Show that seemed all right, but then it seems like Jon Stewart is still a little bit woke. He's always been left wing, but he hasn't always been woke. That's more like a recent occurrence. And The Daily Show was failing under the previous guy, so they tried to bring him back. And I guess we'll see what happened. But people just aren't watching cable television like they once were. As usual, he was funny, but he also spoke irresponsibly about diversity, equity, inclusion in corporate workplaces. In the segment, Charlamagne called attention to television commercials and other performative gestures that businesses made following the murder of George Floyd in summer 2020. To address this problem, businesses turned to a solution called diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI. He stated it means more fair hiring policies, new anti-discrimination rules for the workplace, and sensitivity training. Oh, that's the most ridiculous part right there. Sensitivity training. Charlamagne also noted how several companies maintain all-white executive leadership teams as well as good. Blah blah blah. I've been friendly most of you, but Charlamagne took a reckless turn as he declared, "Oh my goodness, Forbes, really? You took a reckless turn? No, he didn't. The truth about DEI is that although it's well-intentioned, it's mostly garbage. All right, that's 100% accurate. Charlamagne is totally correct when he says that DEI is mostly garbage. And I'm right because every one of you has sat through one of those diversity training sessions and thought, this is some bullshit. There are several problems with such a universal declaration. No, there isn't. It's completely accurate. Moving on. Forbes is clearly a waste of time. Don't read their garbage magazine. Here it says Democrats are doubling down. They're seeking to codify DEI in federal programs, whereas, states like Florida and Texas, far better states than states like California and Washington, right? Florida and Texas trying to get rid of DEI. It's destroyed the public schools. Tons of students are leaving. Tons of students are unhappy with this sort of DEI nonsense, the woke politics on college campuses. Comedians won't go to college, the popular ones at least, won't go anymore because it's not worth the hassle of having people yell at you and try to cancel you. But House Democrats have introduced two pieces of legislation to codify DEI practices and federal programming opportunities. Wow. I mean, that is political indoctrination. That is cultural Marxism, and they're trying to codify it into law, make it a requirement. That's absolutely ridiculous. Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts reintroduced the Federal Government Equity Improvement Act and the Equity and Agency Planning Act on Friday. Wow, that's a terrible idea. The two bills would push federal agencies to enact policies focused on providing equal opportunity. Well, that's not the same thing. Equal opportunity, I mean, that's fine, but that's not what equity is. Equity is equal outcomes through force. Even if you work harder than somebody else, you're not supposed to have better results. That's equity, including people of color, women, rural communities, and individuals with disabilities. Well, we have equal opportunity in the United States. There's plenty of opportunities if you are willing to put in the work, you're willing to take risks, you're willing to experience failure and keep on pushing through, you can be successful in the United States for sure. The Federal Government Equity Improvement Act, oh my goodness, led by Raskin, would create the Interagency Equity Subcommittee and the Performance Improvement Council to help develop data and share the best ways to provide fair government services. Oh my goodness. This makes me think we really need a Javier Milei here to just fire all of these people. What a waste of time. Just start eliminating all of these useless bureaucracies that aren't helping anyone. All they do is talk. All they do is talk and talk. It's just a waste of time. The subcommittee would also be required to seek input directly from those receiving federal services. The federal government must be transparent, accountable, and responsive to everyone it serves, not just those who have had easier access to government services and decision making. Okay, and it goes on. We must center racial equity and justice in every administration. Remember, this is not justice as we would consider it normally. This is social justice, which is the idea that you should identify people exclusively by their political identity and not by who they are intrinsically as people. The biggest advocates of social justice come from 1930s Germany, whether you're talking about postmodernism, the Frankfurt School, right, the 1930s, where they tried to combine Marxism with Freud. They push social justice there. And I hate to break it to you, but there's plenty of mentions of social justice in Mein Kampf. And if you don't believe me, look it up, right? They're all about political identity because that's what socialists and fascists do. Those are different denominations of the same BS religion. And it's we don't need this religion in our institutions or in our education system. Our institutions should be secular. We should not be pushing any particular religion. Equity is really about getting people to understand their racial consciousness, right? Their class consciousness, and so on. And that's a religious endeavor, and it should not be pushed in public institutions. Unfortunately, we have some prominent people like Mark Cuban pushing DEI. You know, I used to like this guy, but apparently he's just as weird as he seemed years ago. He's more of a sales guy. That is the path to CEO in most companies is through sales. They're not always the most intelligent guy, the most knowledgeable, and I'm not chiding his success. He's been incredibly successful in many different fields. I'm just saying I wouldn't go to him for advice on how to live my personal life. He's pushing DEI, which is a disgusting ideology. It's just horrible. DEI is racism. Can't defeat racism because it is racism. Can't defeat racism with more racism. That doesn't make sense. He says, I own or invest in hundreds of companies. He wrote, I own DEI. I know DEI is a positive because I see its impact on bottom lines. Well, turns out a lot of those reports were false, right? We just found out the McKinsey Institute or whatever was faking studies to push DEI, and it doesn't actually work, and it's not in line with a company's fiduciary duty, right? They're supposed to try to raise income levels to help owners or stockholders to make more money. That's the purpose of a business. In their own exposes, Peterson and Rufo accused Cuban of being a rich liberal elite who is trying to appear sympathetic to people from historically marginalized communities. He is just selling out. He doesn't really care about anything. He's a complete waste of time.